What's up everybody, it's Haelian. This is going to be a quick and dirty guide to Dreamscaper to help you better get through the dream world and hopefully get you some wins. The tips I list here are mostly meant for beginners, still on intensity 0, and are things that I felt helped me the most as I got to know the game better. If you got any tips yourself that I didn't list here, make sure you let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that dirty old subscribe button for me. For Grandpa, even. Alright, let's get started. Number 1, equipment levels are very important. When looking at equipment, there are two traits to keep in mind, level and rarity. The DPS, as the game calls it, of your different attacks scales with what level they are, and the level of equipment increases the further into the dream world that you get. Rarity determines how many different modifiers a piece of equipment will have, but those modifiers will be random. They can also be re-rolled in upgrade chambers. An item's level is much more important than rarity, so don't let that golden text distract you, since a higher level means higher base damage, which is incredibly important in comparison to what most modifiers give you. This means that you may actually want to drop a legendary piece of equipment in order to pick up a common weapon that is just 1 or 2 levels higher. If you're still trying to use a level 1 weapon by the 3rd floor, even if it's a higher rarity, you're gonna have a hard time. Fortunately, new equipment drops frequently on floors, so it isn't hard to replace outdated pieces as you go. This segues nicely into my next tip. Number 2, unlock upgrade chambers quick. Upgrade chambers allow you to increase the level of your current equipment in exchange for sand, the white currency that enemies and rocks drop throughout a run. This way you can hold onto your legendary or epic equipment with great modifiers the whole time and just choose to upgrade it as you go instead of replacing it. It also allows you to outgear some floors by piling the levels on early. Having a level 6 ranged weapon on floor 3 makes things much easier, especially the bosses, so this is a great way to get through floors unscathed. I'd also recommend prioritizing unlocking the Founts of Life at the same time, since having the option of a full heal on some floors will help with your longevity immensely. Number 3, don't forget the Influence. Influence is a stat boost you can attain by talking and giving gifts to the various folks outside of the dream world. By increasing your relationship status with a person, their influence stats also go up. You can set your influence at the start of a run, but you can also change it in between floors after exiting the boss room. This is a great option since you might pick up some weapons and keepsakes that make you lean a certain way in how you attack your enemies. For instance, you might find a keepsake that increases your ranged weapon attacks, therefore you might want to equip Eve's Influence, which increases our range, damage, and max lucid. Just keep in mind though, it's best to have a variety of attacks at all times to deal with the different types of enemies out there. Number 4, explore every room. When starting out, it's very important to try to clear every single room and collect as much sand and other resources as possible. There's no real benefit to leaving rooms unexplored unless your health is just too low to take the risk, but even then you usually still have the boss left too. Cracking open every rock you can and collecting every bit of sand from enemies is going to prove direly important in order to purchase or upgrade equipment, so I definitely recommend exploring every single room on each floor until maybe you get to the last floor when there's nothing left to buy or upgrade. Number 5, secret rooms. Each floor has exactly 1 secret room, and there is some logic behind being able to find it. It is most often in a space that is connected to the maximum number of possible rooms. It also cannot be connected to certain special chambers, such as upgrade chambers or shops. However, a secret chamber can be an upgrade chamber of its own. Also, if you use a bomb in a room that's connected to a secret room, the connected wall will begin to shimmer to indicate so. Using this logic, you can usually narrow down the options of where the secret room could be to 1 or 2, thus minimizing how many bombs you have to use to find it. Number 6, not all keepsakes are worth it. You'll often find random keepsakes in treasure rooms, but they're not always useful enough to bother taking over recycling them for the sand. For instance, there are several keepsakes that boost specific elemental damage, but what if you don't currently have that element? You can't necessarily predict or control getting a weapon that does have that element easily. Early on, you won't get much sand for recycling keepsakes, but if you know you're not going to make good use of it, or the odds are low, then I wouldn't bother taking it. There are also some keepsakes that are very risk versus reward, such as gaining 30% movement speed, but the enemies also move 30% faster. Not sure I'd ever want to take this keepsake over recycling it outside of laughs and giggles, honestly. Sometimes keepsakes just don't fit your playstyle either. Maybe you don't utilize the parry very often, but a keepsake that boosts damage after parrying drops for you. Are you really going to utilize it? Long story short, think twice before just picking up every keepsake you see, since you might rather have that small bit of sand instead. Number 7. Try equipment before recycling. Unlike with keepsakes, you can try out equipment that drops before deciding whether to recycle it or keep it. You can even leave your old piece of equipment behind and it will stay right there while you go test out your new weapon on some enemies. At the very least, I would recommend testing it out in the room you're in before recycling, just to get an idea of what it's like. This is especially true for lucid attacks, I feel, which can vary wildly in how they act and feel. Some lucid attacks sound great in text, but when you go to use them, you realize there's a long animation wind up to get it out, or maybe it just doesn't deal as much damage as it sounded, and thus might not work well for you. Number 8. Not all dodges are equal. Dodge equipment are the only type that I would say level does not matter as much. A higher level dodge means slightly higher run speed and maybe more damage delivered depending on the equipment. However, just because you found a level 5 weave, for instance, to replace your level 1 roll, does not mean that you should take it. Some dodges, such as weave and acrobatic shoes, are very short range and barely make your character travel at all. These often have a side benefit, such as dealing damage to enemies around you in exchange for that mobility, but I personally prefer the dodges that let you gain more distance between enemies quickly. Those mostly include Burning Step, Shadow Step, and Roll. Like we just said in the previous tip, make sure you try out all the dodges before you actually decide to keep them in the room that you find them in at the least. Number 9. Be careful with your bombs and keys. You might get tempted to blow up those orange rocks for more sand, but if it means not being able to find the secret room on the floor, it might not be worth it. Also, if you're thinking about unlocking the door to the shop or upgrade room with your last key, make sure to check your sand total first. There's no point in wasting your other resources if you don't have the sand to spend. As time goes on, you'll be able to unlock starting with additional bombs and keys, and this becomes a smaller issue, but is always a factor in runs. I would always just take a glance at the 3 resources in the bottom left before spending any of them. Number 10. Manage your Dream Rush carefully. Dream Rush is your special move that slows down time for your enemies and allows you to get a lot more damage in quickly and safely. It charges after 3 encounters, so you definitely want it charged for each boss fight as much as possible, but it's also a great panic button when things get heated. I find it best not to use it as often as possible, but instead save it for intense situations. It's also great to note that using it will refill your lucid bar, meaning you can use up your whole lucid bar with ranged attacks before using it at no penalty. You can even spam more ranged attacks during it if you wanted, but it does drain your lucid bar and thus shorten your bullet time. And that's it, everybody. Let me know what you thought about the tips in the comments below, and tell me what you think about Dreamscaper thus far while you're at it. Make sure you take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you on the next stream. Bye-bye!